I'm Edward October, and this is A Nefarious Nightmare. This podcast contains foul language and discussions of violence. Additional trigger warnings will be posted as needed in the show notes. Listener discretion is advised.
Living. There is a purpose for everyone, everything, and place. In time, you must seek your purpose in this world. For this purpose is waiting somewhere in this world of ours. Seek, find, and rejoice. You can change my voice. You can dye my hair. You can shorten my nose. But you can't change me inside. I'm me, and I always will be. In the back of my mind are things I've never known. Things of the future and the present, and in time they will forward to me. But I'm so impatient. I wonder if I can wait, that I wish somehow they would all come, rushing out to me. When I sit in my corner and think of the world, I want to roll up and die. But something inside me says no. So I keep struggling on. Why? Kristin O'Connell, in memory of Grandma O'Connell.
This was one of the many poems written by Kristin O'Connell, who left for a walk late one night in 1985 and was discovered to have been murdered. This is a cold case that has baffled many in Ovid, New York, and in her hometown of Burnsville, Minnesota, for many years, perpetuating hearsay and speculation. With as much gossip surrounding the case, it still has not been solved, nor are there any official suspects to this day. With that, I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner. And A Nefarious Nightmare presents Cold Ovid, the mystery behind Kristin O'Connell's murder.
Prior to diving in, we want to thank all of our sources for the information we received for our research. We want to give an extra shout out to Jolynn Rice, who is our main source and also helped us edit and write up this research. Crimepedia Podcast, Tom McAnulty, and Uncovered.com. We thank you all so much for your time and suggestions. This case was quite the doozy to research, but so important because it's a 37-year-old cold case that can be solved. For background, we reached out to Facebook earlier this year to seek out case suggestions. A friend of ours, Tom McAnulty, better known as Arghie, has been requesting more coverage on today's case. He went on to say, quote, Kristin O'Connell went from Minnesota to Ovid, New York to visit a guy she met on spring break. She arrived only to learn he had a girlfriend. She was working out plans to return home, but went to a party with him anyways, and they found her in a cornfield nearby the next day. Police spoke to 0 people from the party, and it remains unsolved. I spoke to the detective who inherited the case last year, and he said he thought he could close it right up. But here we are, end quote. With that, let's dig in.
Kristin is described by her mother as smart, kind, and would stick up for anyone she saw that was being teased or bullied. In an interview her mother did with Matt McAnulty, he mentioned that she was pretty, and she goes on to say, quote, she never knew she was pretty. She was the kind we'd all get dressed up for church as a family. She'd had this nice, pretty little outfit on with heels that were worn down to the ground. She didn't care what anyone thought about her, end quote. Her mother also remembers that they were super close. They very rarely ever did have a disagreement, and they always did mother-daughter type things such as cooking or shopping.
According to an interview with Dateline, shout out to Sonya for helping us find this, Kristin's mom said that she was a sensible child growing up, a beautiful soul who wouldn't hurt a fly. There was one conversation where she remembers Kristin as charitable while in high school wanting to volunteer to babysit the children of women staying at the shelter for domestic abuse victims. They were super close, always shopping together or baking cookies, spending hours together discussing boyfriends, dreams, plans, and the future. Kristin was the type who wanted to save herself for marriage and had morals and was known to have trusted people a little too much. She was also an animal lover. There's even a photo of Kristin with a horse that she called Coco.
She also loved writing poetry, as you can see by the opening of this episode. People who went to college with her always remembered that when they had an issue within their relationships, they'd always visit Kristin and she would always provide advice, somewhat counsel them, and they said that she was their rock. Basically, Kristin cared so much about others and had a huge heart. It's not always true, but we're finding that the old adage, only the good die young, is pretty typical of the cases that we cover, unfortunately.
It all started in the spring of 1985 when Kristin went to Captiva Island on spring break and met a guy by the name of James Jim Vermeech. This island is located in Lee County, close to Fort Myers, Florida, and along the Gulf of Mexico. It's known for its beautiful beaches and fishing opportunity at what is described as beautiful marinas. This type of setting will obviously entice many young adults and college students for a fun time such as spring break. And like any social event or party, you're bound to meet people, and Kristin wasn't an exception. It should come as no surprise that she had a magnetic presence.
There was an obvious spark that had ignited between Kristin and James, which led Kristin to go visit him in Ovid, New York. She went on a trip with her dad, Michael O'Connell, and stopped first in Boston on August 11th, 1985 to stay the night at her dad's friend's house. According to Kristin's mom, she flew on her own to Boston on August 12th, and a business associate of her dad's picked her up and they drove her to Fulton and then on to Syracuse Shopping Town Mall.
What do you think she was trying to fix? Was that part of the attraction for why she made the trip to Ovid, or was it simpler than that?
I think part of it, yes. Because I remember her telling me, she said, Mom, I think he's smoking marijuana, and I've been talking to him about not doing that. Mm-hmm. And, so I think she wanted to help fix him. And, what else he was mixed up in, from down in Florida and coming back. All these kids came back with a lot of money. Then we found out over the years that there were a lot of drugs going back and forth from Florida to the Finger Lakes up into the Ovid area. I've had so many people that have helped me along the way. An ex-principal of a high school who he's got more documentation and interviews than the police have.
On August 14th, around 3 in the afternoon, Kristin called her mom to let her know that she would be coming home early. It's been noted that Kristin sounded very upset, but didn't give any indication as to why. But mother's instinct kicked in, and her mom, Phyllis, had a feeling that something had happened that prompted the early return. People now speculate that Kristin had gone to meet James, hoping that their friendship would move to the next level, only to find out that he already had a girlfriend. It's thought that she was upset and hurt by this, and honestly, who wouldn't be?
Phyllis O'Connell can't shake the apprehension she heard in her daughter's voice during their last conversation.
She said, I'm going to be coming home. And I said, well, why? Is something not right or what? And she said, it's all right, Mom. Don't worry.
O'Connell's daughter, Kristin, was calling from the Finger Lakes region in New York.
She had met a boy on spring break who just charmed her. She thought he was really nice, and she corresponded with him. He invited her up to the Finger Lakes before her junior year started.
O'Connell says even before the trip, she worried. She also worried about Kristin's spring break in Captiva Island, Florida, too.
A lot of these kids would go to Florida. They'd come back up with cocaine, selling it. There was a lot just going on. We don't know if she saw something, she overheard something. If she did, she would say, well, you got to go to the police.
What Kristin may have known killed her. At age 20, she was found dead in a cornfield in the village of Ovid.
Later on that evening, James had a party at his trailer where Kristin had attended. It's been mentioned that the girls at the party weren't very welcoming towards her. Kristin had just found out that James had a girlfriend, and she likely had feelings for him that he didn't reciprocate. With that being said, people at the party weren't welcoming her with open arms, even though she did nothing wrong. Then, actually much later, around 11:30 p.m., Kristin decided she wanted to go take a walk. According to state police investigator Jeffrey Arnold, quote, she did not do drugs and she was not a drinker. She may have been uncomfortable at the party because alcohol was involved and she decided to go take a walk, end quote. It's possible she needed to get away to process whatever it was that had happened, and it's been noted that she did enjoy late night walks by herself, so as out of the ordinary as that sounds, this was absolutely normal. She did leave barefoot and she did leave without her belongings.
Right around midnight, she was seen walking westward on the north shoulder of County Road 139. Multiple people later reported that people had seen her talking to a person in a stopped vehicle. Others observed a car following her. It was here where either a green or blue car was seen pulling up next to her and a second car pulling off the road behind her. She then turned to the opposite direction and 2 men were seen pacing about 50 yards behind her. Witnesses later tell police they believe the occupants of the first vehicle may have been attempting to lure her into the car. Witnesses described the men as younger, slender, with shoulder-length hair, wearing blue jeans and one wearing a jean jacket. One was said to be around 6 feet tall, and the other one was shorter.
It was a spring break trip for 20-year-old college student Kristin O'Connell, and her first time in upstate New York. In 1985, she flew from her home outside Minneapolis to visit a friend in the Finger Lakes town of Ovid.
It seems like yesterday when she said goodbye to me and came in and kissed me goodbye.
On August 15th, 1985, Kristin left a party in Ovid and walked along Route 139 by herself. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. Neighbors reported hearing a scream after midnight. The next day, her body was found. She'd been violently attacked and stabbed multiple times. No arrests have ever been made. And for 30 years, her mother, Phyllis, has been coming back to the Finger Lakes, vowing not to rest until Kristin's murderer is found.
These are small towns. These are small communities. And I know there are people that know. I know they're there.
A person driving by told investigators they thought they saw 2 white teenagers following Kristin.
The next day, in the early morning hours, neighbors reportedly heard screaming. Police believed that this was the time where Kristin had been murdered, and they declared her official date of death August 15th of 1985. That same day, around 1:15 a.m., the 2 males who were following her were spotted walking along the road towards the village. They then changed directions about 15 minutes later, heading west on County Road 139 on the north side of the road.
People from the party she had attended started searching for her around 1:30 a.m., and James Verniche reported her missing to the police. The search didn't immediately start due to it being late and how rainy it had been. Then, around 5:11 p.m. on August 16, 1985, Kristin's body was found, soaked in rain and nude, and left in an overgrown cornfield about a quarter mile from where she was staying at, just east of where the 2 men had changed directions on County Road 139 the day prior.
Seneca County Coroner Michael McLaughlin pronounced her dead. She had suffered multiple stab wounds to the chest. Her throat had been slit. There were no signs of sexual assault and nothing in her blood indicating that she had drugs or alcohol in her system.
A few weeks after she was found on August 23rd, police received a tip from an anonymous source. The caller said to look at a green Chevy on Main Street in Waterloo, open the trunk and, quote, you'll find what you need, end quote, to find the killer. According to a transcript, the caller repeated the information and said, quote, I'm getting out of town because I told him not to do it. I told him not to do it. I'm heading out of town. End quote. Trooper D.C. Rayer, who was the one who took this call, he tried to continue the conversation, but the caller hung up. This is known to be probably the biggest tip they've ever gotten, possibly the only one. Some speculate that this could have been a prank call, but there have been no calls since. Right here, we will add the news clip as well as the original phone call. Please bear in mind the age of the phone call when listening. We will clean it up the best we can, but the idea is so that you can hear what we are talking about.
Tonight, we've learned state police have formed a task force to find Kristin O'Connell's murderer. 6 investigators are working on the case full-time, along with the Seneca County Sheriff's Office and the Waterloo and Seneca Falls Police Departments.
There's a tremendous amount of good suspects in the case, and the overwhelming amount of work, the support of all these units, departments, and the investigators is paramount to solving this case.
At the Waterloo State Police Barracks, an office is filled with photographs, interview transcripts, and a map charting where witnesses last saw Kristin on the night she was killed. One of the most intriguing leads is a tips call police received just days after the murder from a man who said investigators should look for a green Chevy parked on Main Street in Waterloo.
If they listen to it and they know the person, they're going to recognize that voice. It's a unique voice, and we're looking to know who the caller was from that call back in 1985.
World-renowned DNA experts Richard and Selma Eikelenbloom are now going over original crime scene evidence from the case in their Netherlands lab using state-of-the-art touch DNA, seeing if someone left minute skin cells behind on Kristin's clothing. Investigators say the Eikelenblooms have made progress they hope will lead to a breakthrough. Kristin's mother has been a tireless advocate for her daughter's case, and she says she is grateful for police, and especially State Police Major Mark Koss, for putting the task force together.
I realize now that, there are caring people up there that want to get this solved and get to the bottom of it.
You want the guy to kill that guy that girl? Go ahead. You look at mine Chevy, the green Chevy on Main Street in Waterloo, and you'll find him. If you open his trunk, you'll find what you want. The green Chevy on Main Street in Waterloo. If you open his trunk, I'm getting out of town because I told him not to do it. I'm getting out of town. Okay. Oh, where the hell? Green Chevy.
There have been many people speculating on what happened, pointing fingers at certain people, and theorizing online. We joined a few groups and requested more information, and we were flooded with messages from people claiming they had known what had happened. We ended up sticking to our sources, especially our main source, Jolynn Rice, who has made this case a passion project for herself, and also uncovered.com. The reason we're mentioning all of this here is because misinformation can absolutely hurt a case, as well as damage any credibility. Therefore, we will not name any speculated suspects just to protect our integrity and that of others.
One thing to note here is that a lot of police working the case at the time believed that this was a crime of opportunity and that she had been murdered by a complete stranger. However, many residents in and around Ovid believe the complete opposite. Names have been dropped, but again, since there are no official suspects, we will not name them here. Despite every effort, no arrests have been made in connection to the murder. From the start, James and his friend that was there with him when they picked her up from the airport were never named as suspects.
Now, James did leave the party around 11 o'clock p.m. to get food. Kristin left shortly after that for her walk. It's been theorized that he should have at least been investigated due to that fact as a prime suspect, and then thereafter, everyone at the party. It's also been brought up that despite the fact that evidence of a sexual assault was not present when she was found, it's quite weird that she was found naked. It was as though the crime was a personal one, and or that the perpetrator had intended to sexually assault her, but didn't.
A lot of people wonder why all the people at the party weren't looked into further. Kristin's dad claimed they seemed like good kids having a party, but some say that you can be a quote-unquote good kid and still make horrible mistakes, but that this group of kids should have been looked into further, just at least to rule them out and move on to any other suspects.
Following along with the timeline of events, it seems as though there was nothing regarding the case that occurred after August 23rd, 1985, well up until 2009. Police and state investigators said that they were granted up to $40,000 to look into touch DNA, which would have been done by a specialized Dutch forensics team. Unfortunately, state officials and the governor blocked this effort because they didn't have a license from the state of New York, nor did they use a lab from that state. We know what you're thinking, and we agree. It's weird.
Around the same time, a crime analyst was cited for misconduct. Gary Veeder, a forensic analyst who specialized in trace fiber evidence for the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center, relied on prosecutors and juries in sending people to jail for his findings. Sadly, a state investigation found that nearly 1/3 of all cases he had worked, serious missteps were found with the evidence he had provided. Phyllis, Kristin's mom, has been so adamant that the evidence was not tested by the New York State Crime Lab. She does not trust them. Honestly, as a mother myself, I can't say that I blame her.
In 2019, a $10,000 reward is posted for information leading to arrests relating to this case by the Seneca County District Attorney's Office. In 2021, a major true crime series directed by Bill Gutentag, who, by the way, won 2 Academy Awards, offered a state-of-the-art forensics lab to the murder probe. This lab was New York permitted. They agreed to test every bit of physical evidence in Kristin's case without cost to the taxpayer. Alongside this, an accredited cold case team, which was headed by a former manager of the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, offered to donate their time to work alongside state police investigators in this case. But unfortunately, these state police have been uncooperative. They claim it's, quote, against policy for outsiders to be brought into the investigation, end quote. They also question whether this lab is properly licensed in New York, which, by the way, it was.
Before we continue, imagine owning just one pair of shoes. These shoes cost a fortune, but they work very well. High quality, they're durable, non-slip. You get the picture. You lose one of your shoes. You end up having to quit your job and pause your life because you don't have both of your shoes. After seeing you struggle, several people offer to give you shoes. They're all great quality, durable, non-slip, pretty much just like your shoes, but a different brand. They check all the boxes and are cleared for use wherever you work. You have several people coming to you offering to give you shoes.
Yeah, for real. Imagine telling all of these people, I can't take your shoes because it's against policy to own anything other than Birkenstocks. Besides, are you sure these would pass the shoe test? And while the lab is being compared to a new pair of shoes, if you weren't catching our drift then, you most certainly are now. Very important, urgent help was being offered for the cost of free, but they were snubbed and basically looking a fucking gift horse in the mouth. Come on. Fuck the licensing and paperwork. This is now a 37-year-old cold case at this point. Set your fucking pride aside and accept the help.
There are willing people, retired officers, etc., willing to give you their time to help you figure this out. And this help was refused, which further frustrated the family. Evidence included a painter's hat, blood-stained pants, a pillowcase, Kristin's fingernails, which included unknown fibers, a bunch of hairs. 2 were found near her pubic region. There were a total of 318 pieces of physical evidence that were rejected for use with touch DNA testing. It is said that heavy rain made it hard to find much evidence at the scene, although Kristin's clothes and all the other evidence mentioned were recovered.
Several people believe that people at the party she was at know exactly what happened, but nobody will speak up. It's been said that how will the neighbors, hear her loud and horrific scream, but nobody at the party knows anything. The person who made the anonymous phone call, he's also being sought out for questioning. The police are willing to make arrangements for people to listen to a recording of the conversation to see if they can identify the voice. Arnold did say that it had a slight accent. So people can call the state police at 585-398-4123 or the sheriff's department at 220-3250. We will include those phone numbers in our show notes.
In her search for the truth, Phyllis O'Connell has also put together a team of volunteers working on their own independent investigation, including former acting superintendent of the New York State Police, Preston Felton.
It's unbelievable that someone could come to beautiful upstate New York and be murdered and never leave. I mean, it's one of the most troubling cases I've ever seen.
After 27 years with the state police, Felton now works as a private investigator. He is helping Phyllis O'Connell on his own time.
In this case, this is more than a job for me. This is doing what's right.
Some witnesses may have been afraid to come forward years ago, but Felton believes the answers are near.
I'm a firm believer that this case is going to be solved. And I think, the state police has got their investigation. We've got ours. One of the two groups is going to solve this.
He hopes people will continue to come forward, saying even what could seem like small or inconsequential information could actually be a vital link between other evidence.
Imagine it as a jigsaw puzzle, and we're putting the pieces together.
As painful as it can be, Phyllis O'Connell came back to the Finger Lakes last week to meet with police and her team of independent investigators. She believes there are people in the Finger Lakes area who know what happened to her daughter, and maybe they're finally ready to help a grieving family.
After all these years, I just wish someone would finally find it in their conscience to say, oh, I do know, and give us peace.
Kristin's mother has spent money and time trying to find her daughter's killer. She's in constant contact with the police. She says that she just wants to know who did this and to see justice done before she dies. All those at the party have been cleared as suspects, and nobody is saying they did anything. But someone knows something. In fact, Jolynn Rice, our main source for this episode, states that there are plenty of rumors circling around about this. It was a small town murder in a farm town community, and that there are several oddities surrounding this case. She also states that she wasn't a high-risk victim, so that more than one person at the party knows more than what has been stated publicly. She also mentions that we have to consider actual information and ignore misinformation. That the longer a case goes unsolved, the more conspiracy theories and nut jobs come out of the woodwork. One thing is for sure, someone had to find her at the right moment to do what happened to her. The idea that this was some random person is kind of crazy given the town is such a small town. It's smaller than small.
If any of you have any information on this case, please refer back to our show notes. All sources are listed. Also, if you'd like bonus content, our name is now searchable on Patreon. Just look us up. We have several tiers starting at only $3 a month. We have our palate cleanser podcast. It's called Not So Nefarious Criminals. In case you have that semi-morbid sense of humor and want to chill, relax, and, listen to us discuss dumb fucking criminals.
Yeah, that podcast is so fun, y'all. Well worth joining Patreon. Oh, follow us on Twitter. We are doing a daily thing where we want to learn more about the people. It's fun to engage. Also, follow our Instagram and Facebook. Just follow us on every damn thing. What have you got to lose? And also, next year we will be at the True Crime Podcast Festival in Austin. We want to see you there, and to be sure to visit truecrimepodcastfestival.com and buy your tickets now. Also, we will have a booth at the Pride in Dallas Parade this year. We will be there from 1 to whenever it's done on Sunday, September 18th, 2022. Come see us and celebrate our LGBTQ+ community with us. Shout out to Craig Sullivan for letting us know about it.
Kristin O'Connell and her family and her friends, as well as all of those who advocate for her, all of them are bees. While Kristin wasn't known as a high-risk person, she was still murdered, and somebody knows something. Bees are vulnerable despite their strength and resilience, and we must protect the bees. They need justice, and Kristin deserves justice. Her family deserves justice. So always be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Original intro music by Ghost Stories Incorporated. Remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional music provided by Epidemic Sound. This podcast was researched, scripted, and produced by Amanda Cronin and Courtney Finner. A Nefarious Nightmare is a Cloud 10 iHeart podcast. Managed by A Nefarious Nightmare, Sim Sarna, and Jamie Rice of Murderish and Dirty Money Moves. Thank you again for listening, and be vigilant.